Welcome, adventurers. Today on Rebel Then King, we are going to talk about the most rewarding part of each class, at least the first half of that list. I've already gone over the best part of each class, but that was a bit more focused on things that you get to consistently do, things that consistently shine about a class. The most rewarding is more about the things that don't necessarily happen all that often, but when they do, you feel incredibly satisfied with your choice to play that class. You think, aha, that is why I built this character. So what is so rewarding about the various classes, starting with the Alchemist? I can say from personal experience, when it comes to playing as an Alchemist, the most rewarding thing you can do is trigger enemy weaknesses, especially in groups. As an Alchemist, you don't have a ton of martial prowess per se, but you can adapt what you're doing to trigger enemy weaknesses with various mutagens and various bombs and even poisons. And when you are using a bomb and dealing splash damage around the original target, and there are multiple enemies standing next to each other, and they all have the same weakness to fire or acid or electricity or whatever it happens to be, you will do damage to that original target and then a little bit to each enemy around that, and then trigger the weakness in all of them. So you might add as much as 12 extra points of damage on top of what you were already doing, and boom, suddenly you're hitting harder than the Barbarian, for one bomb toss at least. And speaking of that Barbarian, I think the most satisfying thing is just brute forcing your way through resistances. What happened when a fighter who has great accuracy, maybe only has a one-handed weapon because they're sword and board, goes up against a target who has a resistance to physical damage and is immune to crits? Well, depending on that damage roll from the fighter, that fighter might literally do nothing. But when you have a Barbarian and you have a D12 weapon and you're +4 strength and you're +3 or +6 or whatever it happens to be from your rage damage, you're going to do damage no matter what, unless something has a complete immunity to the type of physical damage that you're doing. And it is just so satisfying to walk up next to something that is stifling all of your allies and just say, yeah, I'm just going to go with what works. Smash, and you kill it anyway. When it comes to being the Bard, I also know from personal experience, it is so satisfying to be the +1 that matters. Maybe someone misses a strike by 1, but then you factor in Courageous Anthem, and that is a hit. Maybe they hit but missed a crit by 1, and then boom, Courageous Anthem turns it into a crit. Maybe they were about to fail a save against a fear effect, but boom, Courageous Anthem, again, they're okay. That's all just Courageous Anthem. Now imagine all of the other composition cantrips that the Bard has access to, and just imagine all of the ways as a Bard you can be the +1 that matters. If you've watched any of my other videos, you know that I like the Champion because of how reliable their reactions are. It is a class built around reactions. Reactions are often niche and can't be used that often, so when you are playing as a champion and you are positioning yourself correctly and you get to use your reaction in every single round of an encounter, oof, you have hit the sweet spot of playing this class. It's definitely easier to use your reactions more reliably than with other classes, but it still usually doesn't happen that often that a champion on every single round in an encounter gets to use your reaction. But when you do, and you keep stifling those GM attacks with your ability to mitigate damage, it's pretty darn satisfying. Now, when it comes to the Cleric, I think nothing is more satisfying than unleashing a 3-action heal spell that heals your allies and harms the undead. The 3-action heal spell will emanate 30 feet of healing all around you. And sometimes you do this to heal your allies and, well, unfortunately heal an enemy as well, but sometimes that's still worth it. But if you are fighting something that is actually harmed by healing, by vitality, then you are healing all of your allies and hurting multiple, ideally, enemies. And that can result in the single biggest swing in total hit points in an encounter that any character can do. And it also feels so satisfying to really play out that holy warrior sort of fantasy of standing in the middle of a battleground, unleashing a healing spell, a big spell with all of your actions and totally changing the course of an encounter. And hey, if you're an evil cleric and you've got a party of undead skeletons on your side, well, do the same thing, but with the harm spell. With a druid, I think it is very satisfying to actually get to make use of your ability to talk to either plants or animals. Remember, as part of the Player Core 1 remaster, druids now have a core class feature called Voice of Nature, and you get to pick up either animal empathy or plant empathy as part of that. Now, in theory, this could happen quite a lot, but in reality, it usually doesn't because you're going in and out of cities or maybe very hostile woods, and maybe something talks to you, but it doesn't really quite work out. But when you can ask a mushroom where the bad guy went, or avoid a trap because you talked to a rabbit over there, it is going to help out your party so much, and it really makes you feel very special as the druid. And considering that I think a lot of people play the druid because in real life they are plant and animal lovers, well, being able to talk to a plant or animal kind of fulfills an ultimate fantasy. When it comes to the fighter, I think it is quite fun, if not a little cheeky, to be able to land a hit even with a terrible attack roll. With that expert weapon proficiency that you have, if you are fighting a lower level creature, you might land a hit on a 3 or a 4, and it just feels ridiculous. Sure, critting feels great, but there's just something so kind of funny and almost cheat code-like of being able to land a hit with such a terrible roll. It's usually a good laugh at the table, and, well, fighter's gonna fight, so you're just doing you, and it feels fun. And when it comes to the Gunslinger, I am going to go with critting. That's because when you are using your firearms as a Gunslinger, you're often doing pretty small bits of damage. You might only have a D4 or D6 plus 1 due to the singular expertise class feature, so you might go a few rounds only doing 2 or 3 points of damage. But then when you crit and get to use that deadly D10 trait of your firearm, depending on which firearm it is, of course, and you upgrade to a D10 and then double it and then add another D10 afterwards, you are suddenly doing so much damage. And frankly, yes, gunslingers will land crits fairly often due to their expert weapon proficiency, but not all the time, so I still think it deserves to be in this list of rewarding things that you don't get to do every single round at least. When it comes to the Inventor, I think one of the most satisfying things that you can do is enter a state of overdrive with a critical success. Remember, to go into overdrive, you make a crafting check against a standard level based DC. With a regular success, you add half your intelligence modifier. With a critical success, you add your full intelligence modifier. Presuming that's a +4, you are adding 4 points of damage on top of everything else to your strikes, and you are hitting just about as hard as your Barbarian or Thaumaturge at that point. And you are doing so with your intelligence. You are not just doing it with brute strength, which is the flavor of this class, so you feel so rewarded for having so heavily invested in intelligence, and it just is all working out, and you are the hero of the encounter. As the Investigator, nothing feels better than fighting a creature which is already the subject of one of your pursued leads. That's because when you do so, you get to use your core martial mechanic, devise a stratagem as a free action rather than as an action. For a free action, you get to calculate whether or not you're going to land a hit. If you are going to land a hit, you make that strike as your next action, and you get to add extra damage to it. In an encounter that lasts 3 rounds, you are basically giving yourself 3 free actions, or essentially giving yourself an entire extra round of actions to do whatever you happen to want to do. So make sure as an investigator to keep those leads active, because you never know when one of them might be your next encounter. With the Kineticist, I really like the way you are rewarded for focusing on a single element. Remember, at level 1, you can either be a single gate or dual gate Kineticist using either 1 or 2 elements. If you are single gate, you are rewarded with something called an impulse junction. This is a benefit that happens when you use a 1 or 2 action impulse, which is the Kineticist version of spells and their base attacks. And then at level 5, you can either choose to expand the gate, staying with one element, or fork the path, picking up others. If you choose to expand the gate, you again get another reward. This is called a gate junction. You get some skill training, or a bonus that happens in your aura, or something that happens on critical hits, or some resistances. So if you make it all the way through level 5 and you are focusing only on one element and you are making great use of your impulse junction and gate junction bonuses, it feels incredibly rewarding, and it's honestly the way that I would go with most Kineticist builds, though I will say when you get to do the composite junctions that are a combination of multiple elements later, man, those are pretty darn cool. And on to the last for today, the Magus. I'm going to go with 2 rounds, 2 spell strikes. The Magus is a fantastically designed class that somewhat revolves around their core ability called Spell Strike, which allows you to imbue a spell into a weapon attack. This takes 2 actions, and once you do it, you can't do it again until it's recharged. You can recharge it by either taking a dedicated action to do so, basically a 1-action rest, or by using your Conflux spell, which is your focus spell, so it's basically once an encounter that you get to do that. The thing is, due to the reality of combat, you often have to move or take a defensive action, and you don't get a chance to recharge that spell strike like you'd like to. So when you do, and you have 2 rounds back to back, and you get to spell strike, and it's a hit, and then you recharge, and then you spell strike again, and it's also a hit, not only is it incredibly rare and incredibly satisfying, but you've basically just landed 2 melee attacks, or range if you're the ranged Magus build, plus 2 spells, and chances are you have ended the encounter. All right, adventurers, that is it for today. Anything else you think I'm missing, let's talk about it in the comments. Anything that you think is even more rewarding about one of these classes. Until then, remember that making use of these maybe somewhat lesser known or more difficult parts of each class, it's a great way to level up your gameplay, keep you engaged, and hopefully, ultimately, have more fun.